This is the Discovery Files podcast from the U.S. National Science Foundation. I'm Nate Potker. Computer technology now has a role in almost every aspect of our lives. With advancements in AI and machine learning hitting an exponential growth period, STEM education and attracting students to study computer sciences are going to be more important than ever to ensuring our country's future. My guests today engage young people with music in a unique combination DAW, or digital audio workstation, and coding environment. I'm joined by Jason Freeman, professor of music, and Brian Magerko, professor of digital media, both from the Georgia Institute of Technology, where they developed and co-founded EarSketch, which has gone on to engage a diverse audience of over 1 million users in more than 5,000 schools in all 50 states and over 180 countries. Thank you both for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
My pleasure.
So I want to start with the genesis of EarSketch. Where did the initial idea of engaging students with coding and remixing come from?
Well, honestly, the original impetus was when I showed up here as a freshman or junior colleague at Georgia Tech. I had talked with Jason about collaborating on an online environment that would teach music composition. So its impetus really was in trying to get people together online of different skills, like different experience from novices to experts, and making music and collaborating together. And that quickly turned into, I think, at Jason's suggestion, incorporating the idea of programming into it, and it turning into more of a programming literacy and music literacy project rather than just a music literacy.
Right, it's very cool how it combines the two things. In the initial gestation, I guess, was there challenges in building the DAW coding interface? So I know it was more based around a DAW to begin with.
Yeah, so we knew from the very beginning that we wanted something that was going to really feel real and authentic to students. And so we wanted to do that with a few different things. Real programming languages, so we settled on Python, and then later out of JavaScript. Real kind of music, and so we wanted to use work from real artists that could be remixed in the platform, but also kind of the feeling of real music production environment. And so initially, as we were really kind of prototyping this idea to see if it would work, we built it on top of an existing digital audio workstation, which is kind of the standard music production program like GarageBand or Pro Tools or anything that might be used either by a consumer kind of for fun, casually, or in a professional recording studio. And so there's a very kind of quirky and amazing digital audio workstation program called Reaper, which is made by a very small company, which is designed to be extremely customizable. And so we really built the initial version of EarSketch as layers on top of this existing DAW, so that we had something to build from, and we didn't have to build the whole thing up from scratch before we could see if it worked or not.
Can you talk a little bit about the decision or the evolution of it becoming a web-based platform?
Well, I can talk a little bit about it, just to take turns, I guess. But we realized how difficult it is to get software installed on computers in classrooms. So, not having worked in this space before, we went in fairly naive about kind of, you just download it, and you know, but there's paperwork. You need approval from IT people at the county level, and that seemed like a real bottleneck to having this thing being more broadly accessible to people.
Absolutely. Can we talk a little bit about that rollout into schools? Like, I believe you started with a local Atlanta school to begin with, and then sort of it has gone quite some far distance from there since.
Yeah, just on the technology standpoint, we used to have to go into each school that wanted to use EarSketch and really build a custom software installer for them that worked within the IT policies and the technologies in their school district to get the thing to work. And it was like a full day job of us working with their team to get it work. And we realized that wasn't scalable. And there was also a change happening with web technology and audio around the time. So in the early 2010s, when we built this first version of EarSketch as a desktop program on top of the Reaper DAW, it wasn't really possible to do very much with audio on the web. There were a bunch of clunky technologies like Flash and things like that didn't work very well and were really painful to use. But as we moved into the mid-2010s, this new technology called Web Audio API emerged as a standard and really became an industry standard like it is now, and paved the way for a wide variety of web-based applications that can do some pretty sophisticated things with audio, not just EarSketch, but a lot of other things that we see and use now. And so the timing was really good for us to make that transition to respond to the needs of schools. And I think EarSketch really started to take off after that, because it wasn't anymore just something where people had to come to our research team and collaborate with us and go through a long process to get this into their schools, but it was just a website. They could see it. I remember around 2014, we gave a workshop at a conference on a Friday afternoon, and on Monday morning, one of those teachers was already using it in his school with his students. So that kind of turnaround was something that really the web deployment made possible.
Right. It really opens up the accessibility for someone to be joining it or just getting a hold of it to begin with. One of the other things I wanted to ask about, you talked about working with real music samples. How did you come to engage with Richard Devine and Young Guru, and you kind of get these notable people to contribute?
Jason, you want to take that?
Sure, I can take that. So Richard Devine lives in the Atlanta area. His studio is up in about an hour north of the city. And I forget exactly how we first connected to him. But yeah, maybe Brian will have to jump in and tell us that story.
I thought you remembered. That's why I brought it to you.
I know that he came and visited one of the very first summer camps that we did with EarSketch. We invited him to come. And this is before he had created any content, or maybe right as he was starting. And he talked to the students and kind of shared his experiences with them. And really got into the project. And then we worked with him on an ongoing basis over several years to create some more of the content with EarSketch.
At this point, I'll interrupt our conversation to welcome electronic musician and sound designer Richard Devine. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, no problem. My pleasure.
How did you first get involved with EarSketch?
We did several projects together before we started EarSketch, and I visited their facility and some of the things that they were doing at the Georgia Tech department there, which was very interesting. Some of the stuff, especially with the robotics and the Simu, who you could jam with, which was really neat. I love all the research that they were working on as far as like trying to develop these music systems where you can interact with them. Have a true sort of like, well, it's not a replacement for a real musician, but the goal was to create a system that could jam with you. You pick a key, a tempo, a scale or a style of music, and then that robot or system could jam with you and play music with you, which I thought was fascinating. John, about doing the EarSketch project, it was really cool. He was telling me about it, how they were trying to teach live coding to students. It was going to be a live coding application environment. They needed to design an internal library that the students could use and have a wide variety of different sounds and genres of music and musical styles and rhythmic styles that they could pick from to create these musical compositions. And I was like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. I had actually just started learning to do a little bit of live coding myself.
Thinking about your role in EarSketch and sound design and your approach to sound design, you've done a lot of sample libraries and things over the years. Can we talk a little bit about what your approach is? And I think maybe specifically with EarSketch, what kind of things you were looking to make to supply them with, or if you dug into old things you had already had.
No, for EarSketch, I created all new material for them, because obviously we wanted it to be copyright free. If they made music and released it somewhere, I usually create everything from the ground up, from scratch.
You've done quite a bit of engaging with students and lecturing at different places over the years. Can you talk a little bit about being open to opportunity and kind of inspiring people? So I know you started with an art background, but ended up having a career in music, and I'm similar that way. Like, it's interesting to see how things change.
Yeah. It's funny how life can sometimes, the twists and turns it'll take you on. Sometimes you just never know where it'll take you. Yeah, like you said, I was originally got my bachelor's in fine arts and graphic design. Thought I was going to be a graphic designer. That's what I was, the path that I was on. But my music career it was already taking over my life at that time. It was constant touring. I was releasing records, working with record labels. I'd be telling my teachers in college, I was like, I'm going to be going on a 12-week tour, a 6-week bus tour through Europe, or I'm going to be in Australia or Japan or some South America, some crazy place, Iceland. Who knew? I mean, they were always like, where are you going this weekend? I was like, I have no idea. I'll tell you when my booking agent sends me my itinerary tomorrow. But it was really fun. Yeah, I'd say it's great if you're a musician and want to pursue that route. I highly recommend it. I thought it was a great. It's a great way to see the world and to share your music with fans. There's just really no other way to get that sort of. I don't know how to explain it. The energy, the source, the crowd of the energy between the sort of dialogue you have with your audience is it's really unique when you play a live performance. I just actually got back from Denver a couple days ago. Played at a place called Meow Wolf, which is this insane art installation building. But yeah, it's like I said, it's been a really fun journey for me. I'd say I worked freelance for about 25 years working with commercial agencies, and then eventually started working for more of the bigger, through the commercial agencies, I started working directly with the companies and said, hey, instead of going through the advertising agency, we'd actually like to hire you directly to work on a product with us that we're releasing. And then I started working with everyone from Barnes & Noble to Google to Apple to Sony to you name it. I was getting calls all over the place to do stuff, and then the project started to get even crazier. Started out doing sounds for like tablets, and then iOS, doing stuff for Audi, and then Jaguar car company contacted me to do sound design for their first EV electric vehicle, and then
that's one of the bullet points I wanted to talk to you about.
Yeah,
like we do a lot of talking about technology and advances in technology, and thinking about electric vehicles. And I think that's interesting. I wanted to hear about your approach, because if you're imagining what something that's silent might sound like, you can go any direction.
Oh yeah, that's that was the thing. The issue that was presented with Jaguar at the time, I think this was a legislative law that got passed. I think it was, I want to say 2016. That they changed the law in the UK that said that their car, any electric car, had to emit what they call an exterior warning sound. So, if you were hard of hearing or you were blind and you're walking in a parking lot, you needed to be able to hear a vehicle coming towards you. Because they had a bunch of lawsuits, there was a lot of problems, and so they got this legislative law passed, and then once it went into effect, all the manufacturers that were going to be making electric vehicles in the UK had to abide by this law and make these sounds. So because of that, a friend of mine who worked at the company reached out to me on Twitter, out of all places, and said, hey, Rich, would you be available to work on this very crazy project that we have? We have no idea how we're going to do this. We've never done this before. And we're hoping that maybe you could help us solve this problem. And at the same time, maybe it could be a branding moment where we could actually make the car sound however we want, because they gave us, and the legislative doctor was very, very specific. There were some specific guidelines of where the sound frequency had to be within this certain range so that people that are hard of hearing could hear it. But other than that, we had freedom to do whatever we wanted to do.
Thanks for your insight, Richard. Professor Freeman, do you recall how Young Guru came to be involved?
Young Guru, I remember exactly how it happened. His team approached us. They weren't even aware that EarSketch existed, but at the time he was doing a tour of universities around the country called Era of the Engineer, where he would come and spend time on university campuses, meeting with students and talking to them. And he wanted to do that at Georgia Tech. And we said, that's great. You should absolutely come. But we want to tell you about this other thing and this opportunity. And he got really into that. He did a school visit with us in the early days of EarSketch, spent time with students, really worked on customizing content to what students were looking for. And that was a great relationship as well.
Yeah, very exciting to bring the people. I'm sure that helped engage the students when it's somebody they've heard of being involved and maybe being in their classroom, showing up to talk about it.
That was actually sort of a big point of what we felt like was the authenticity of the experience, was seeing folks from the music industry buying in to this, I think is really important, or has been really important for students.
Right. Can we talk about some of those milestones of success? Like, what were some of the points for you along the way that really marked the growth?
Well, I'm trying to think of what the different things would be. I mean, one was absolutely transitioning to being on the web. That, in terms of the kind of decisions that we made, was probably the most significant. I think another would be the beginning of our relationship with Amazon Future Engineer. So we had an amazing library from Young Guru and Richard Devine, but music continues to move forward and culture continues to move forward, and involving students, involving icons that students were especially motivated by now is a real boon to the program. So Amazon Future Engineer is an outreach, STEM outreach program through Amazon, obviously, I guess. And they've been able to, over the past several years, reliably connect us with current stars, especially in the hip hop world, like Pharrell Williams, Common, and lots of other folks, and being able to have this kind of continuing connection with artists on an annual basis, and honestly with a very significant social justice component intertwined with it, has been I think a huge turning point for EarSketch as well.
Yeah, I wanted to add on. I totally agree with what Brian just said. I wanted to add on two other things I think have been really significant. One, connected with Amazon Future Engineer, was the idea to start doing competitions for K-12 students to submit their songs and win prizes. And that was a model we had experimented with a little bit. And then Amazon came to us and really wanted to do it on a national scale and helped us do this in a much bigger way than we've been able to do on our own. And so the idea that students are submitting something, theme, connected with an artist, that when they win, they might have a chance to be connected to that artist in some way, that they're getting some national exposure, they're getting a scholarship or other kinds of prizes that come with that, has been really impactful. And I think brought a lot of new students and a lot of new teachers to the platform. The other thing, like Brian was saying, was connecting that not just to music and coding, but to connecting it to other themes that are really important. And so the Your Voice is Power, the partnership with Pharrell and his foundation, Yellow, and Amazon Engineer, this is all really led by our colleague, Roxanne Moore, so I want to give credit where it's due, has been incredible in really broadening the scope, that it's not just about music and coding, but it's about all these other things too, about entrepreneurship, about social justice, and all these other kinds of themes that come into play. The other thing I think that's been really important has been the internationalization of the platform. So 3 or 4 years ago, through support from, as part of a National Science Foundation grant we've been doing with the University of Puerto Rico, we translated the whole platform into Spanish. And then once that infrastructure was in place, other people started coming to us. And so now it's been internationalized to other languages as well. It's in Hebrew and Arabic and French. It's in 2 Inuit languages from First Nations tribes in Canada. And and there's more interest coming all the time for other languages. But it was really that first step of translating to Spanish, creating that architecture that made it easy for others to step in and add their own language support as well, that really started that and has spurred a lot of adoption, particularly outside of the U.S.
That's really fantastic, getting it moved into a localized language that's more intuitive for everybody to work with.
I think there are a few areas that we're really focused on in the next few years that build around success that we've had so far. One is about accessibility. So we've been working pretty intently to make the platform more accessible, particularly to students who are blind or low vision. because a lot of computer science education platforms are focused on generating visual output. You're making a game, you're making an animation, something like that. EarSketch is focused on creating audio, so it seems like a natural fit for these students to use. And so we really want to work to very intentionally create a more universal design that really makes it better for all learners. It creates a more intuitive and effective interface that really starts from the perspective of universal design. So that's one priority of ours, I think. Another one is really looking at the collaboration. Brian and I have been talking about how this all started with this idea of how students collaborate with each other. And so we're learning a lot more about how students collaborate with each other to make music through code with EarSketch. And we want to take some of what we've learned and really feed that back into the platform to help students collaborate more effectively, not only with each other, but also with AI, as that becomes an increasingly important part of the way the world works. So those are some other priorities of ours moving forward.
I was thinking about that. Would there be a future where there was some machine learning component involved?
Well, there actually is an experimental version of EarSketch that has a learning companion that's AI based that can code with you and make music with you. It's still in its experimental stages. It's not released yet, but that we sort of see that as part of the future of the work. And honestly, when we started that project 4 years ago, ChatGPT and all these large language models were not a thing, and how that affects the ecosystem of how students are coding in the future is something that we're going to have to be considering, and what that means for us in terms of what we should be focusing on teaching, what technologies we should be integrating with it, etc.
I think the last question I should directly ask you is, can you speak a little bit about how NSF funding has impacted your careers directly?
I never expected to be in this position of a significant portion of my work as an academic being supported by the National Science Foundation. That said, I think that it's been hugely impactful, because I think the NSF funding is what enabled Brian and I to kind of start exploring this crazy idea and to see if it would work and really pilot it. And then when we saw the success with student engagement and their interest in how music was driving their interest to continue studying computer science, across gender, across ethnicity, across all different kinds of learning contexts, NSF really provided us the structure to continue scaling that work up, continue studying its effectiveness, and start really broadening the dissemination of that work. And we've received some significant funding from and support from industry, particularly from Amazon Future Engineers since then. It's really focused on further kind of broadening that on a national scale. But the NSF is what enabled us to ask the questions in the first place, to get those answers and to really build this up step by step. And it's still the entity that's supporting us as we ask these other questions, like how might EarSketch work with students who are blind or visually impaired? How might it work with AI? All these different kinds of things. There's so many more questions that we have to ask that we want to explore. And NSF is really the place that enables us to do that.
And I'll just say I've been very fortunate to be funded by the NSF to investigate multiple questions about the relationship between human creativity and technology, especially within a learning context. And I mean, we've affected over 1 million people and their lives through the work that we've done so far. And in terms of kind of career fulfillment, I don't have anything that can top that. So I feel like very fortunate to have been able to put this work out there and to let it grow and to really have an impact on people's lives and their futures.
Yep. You guys are opening up coding to a whole different generation that might not even think to look at it. Like, it's very cool.
Yeah, I'll just say that EarSketch is, like we've been talking about, it's web-based, it's free, and anyone can try it out, earsketch.gatech.edu. So if listeners have been intrigued by anything that they heard today, please go try it out. Look at music that other people have made. Start going through the tutorials. It's very easy to learn, even if you don't know anything about music and you don't know anything about coding. You can get started making some pretty cool music in really a matter of minutes.
And for teachers that are listening, there's also a large amount of teacher resources. And you can visit us on our Facebook EarSketch teachers group, or email us directly, and we can hook you up with a lesson plan and curriculum for implementing this in your class, whether it's just for a single day or for 6 weeks.
Well, thank you both so much for your time today. For the Discovery Files, I'm Nate Potker. Special thanks to Jason Freeman, Brian Magerko, and Richard Devine. Please subscribe wherever you get podcasts, and if you like our program, share with a friend and consider leaving a review. Discover how the U.S. National Science Foundation is advancing research at nsf.gov.